On Christmas Eve 1945, a family's home burned to ashes in a small West Virginia town. 5 children vanished. No bodies, no clues, just a trail of questions that still baffle investigators today. Was it an accident? Or something far more sinister? What really happened to the Sodder children? Stay with us as we unravel a mystery that refuses to die. Christmas Eve 1945. A night that began like any other in the small mountain town of Fayetteville, West Virginia. The festive air of the holiday season was soon to be pierced by an unimaginable tragedy, forever marking this date with sorrow for one family. George and Jenny Sodder had prepared their modest house for the holiday. A freshly chopped tree stood proudly in the corner, adorned with simple paper chains and homemade ornaments. The smell of baking apples and cinnamon filled the air. It was a scene of domestic warmth, a haven George, an immigrant, and Jenny had built for their children. Outside, the first snow of winter was falling softly, blanketing the town in silence. The children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and little Betty, were nestled upstairs in bed, their laughter now replaced by quiet dreams. These 5, along with their older siblings, most of whom were away that night, were the heart of the Sodder home. But as midnight approached, everything changed. The familiar peace of Christmas Eve was about to be irrevocably shattered. George was working late, finishing his shift at the family's coal business. Jenny was downstairs preparing to call the children for bed one last time. A late phone call, a wrong number, had briefly disturbed Jenny, who noticed the lights were still on and the door unlocked, unusual for her typically responsible children. Suddenly, a loud crack. Not from the fireplace, but a sharper, more alarming sound. A spark, a flicker, then flames licking at the wooden walls. The fire, originating in George's office, began its destructive crawl. Jenny smelled smoke, thick and choking. She grabbed the nearest candle and hurried upstairs, only to find the hallway already engulfed. Her path to her sleeping children was rapidly becoming impassable. The fire was moving too fast. The family's only ladder was missing, nowhere to be found. This crucial piece of equipment, normally kept in its place, had vanished when it was most desperately needed. George, awakened and rushing to help, found his usual rescue route cut off. George ran to start the trucks parked outside, but both refused to start. Dead silence. His plan to use the vehicles to reach the upstairs windows was thwarted by their inexplicable failure. The telephone wires had been cut. Their attempt to call the fire department was met with an ominous lack of a dial tone. No calls for help could be made. No neighbors would be warned. They were utterly isolated, trapped with the inferno. Weeks later, investigators would discover the phone line had been severed some 14 feet up the utility pole, a full day before the fire. This was no accident. It was a deliberate act requiring effort and planning. Who could have done this, and why? The question hung heavy, pointing towards premeditation. Why disable the family's only link to the outside world, just before their home was set ablaze? Even the family dog, Beauty, a fiercely protective German shepherd, stayed silent that night. Her usual chorus of barks at any disturbance was eerily absent. A dog who barked at strangers, alert to danger, yet on this night, she didn't make a sound. Was it fear, or something else? Had she been silenced, or did she recognize the source of the night's terror? In the chaos, George frantically searched for the children, shouting their names through the smoke and flame. He even broke a window to re-enter the burning structure, injuring himself in his desperate bid. His ladder gone, the trucks dead, no phone to call for help. Every attempt at rescue was inexplicably blocked. One by one, the children disappeared from sight. By the time the fire was finally under control, 5 children were missing. The Fayetteville Fire Department, arriving late, could only watch the house be consumed. The town mourned. The Sodders were surrounded by neighbors who offered help and prayers. But whispers began to spread. As the strange circumstances came to light, did the children really perish in the fire? Why were no bodies found? Why did the dog stay silent? The fire destroyed the house, but it left behind only ashes and a mystery. For months, the family and authorities searched the charred ruins, but no remains of the children were ever found. Not a single bone, not a scrap of clothing. How was this possible? Could 5 children be completely incinerated in less than an hour? Experts later questioned this, noting that even intense fires usually leave skeletal remains. It was a question no one could answer. Then strange reports started to surface. Eyewitnesses claimed to have seen a car speeding away from the house that night, with children inside. These accounts painted a chilling picture of abduction. Phone calls and letters came in suggesting the children might still be alive. But who would take them, and why? Could this have been a kidnapping disguised as a fire? A cruel plan to erase a family? The series of impediments, ladder, trucks, phone, seemed too coordinated for coincidence. The Sodder children vanished. Their house burned to the ground, but the answers remained buried beneath the ashes. Jenny Sodder refused to accept death as the final answer. Her maternal instinct cried out against the official version. She promised herself and her missing children that she would search until her last breath. This vow fueled her existence. And so, the mystery began. A story of disappearance, suspicion, and the desperate hope for truth. Stay with us, because the night the Sodder children vanished is only the beginning. With the fire smoldering behind them and 5 children missing, George and Jenny Sodder were left with only one thing: questions. Questions that refused to be answered. The official cause of the fire, faulty wiring, was quickly established, but for the Sodders this explanation felt hollow and insufficient. The authorities arrived quickly, but their reports were confusing. An accidental fire, they said. The children presumed dead, they said. Yet this presumption came without the recovery of any physical remains, a point that deeply troubled the grieving parents. But the Sodders knew better. There was something wrong, a gnawing feeling that the full story of that Christmas Eve was far from being told. First, the mysterious disappearance of the ladder. It wasn't just misplaced. George was certain it had been there earlier. A simple tool, yes, but without it, there was no way to rescue the children trapped upstairs. Its absence at such a critical juncture was baffling and devastating. It was later found thrown in an embankment some distance from the house. George was certain the ladder had been stolen. But who would do such a thing? And why? This act alone suggested malicious intent. The trucks, which were vital for transportation and business, failed to start. Neither would budge that night. George, a mechanic by trade, couldn't understand their simultaneous, inexplicable failure. Some said it was a coincidence. Others whispered sabotage. For the Sodders, it felt like another deliberate impediment in a horrifying chain of events. Perhaps the strangest detail was the cut phone line. This discovery transformed the narrative from potential accident to probable crime. Discovered to have been severed a full 24 hours before the fire, the line had been snipped 14 feet above the ground on the utility pole. This required someone to physically climb the pole, a clear act of premeditation. A repairman later confirmed the cut was deliberate. A deliberate act. Someone didn't want the Sodders to call for help. To be isolated, unable to summon the fire department or alert neighbors. Yet no suspects ever emerged. This crucial piece of evidence of foul play seemed to lead nowhere in the official investigation. And then there was Beauty, the family's loyal German shepherd, known for her fierce territoriality and vocal warnings. A dog who was normally fierce and protective, who barked at strangers and warned of danger. That night, she was silent. For hours, while her home burned and her family was in peril. An unnatural silence. This profound anomaly deeply unsettled the Sodders and fueled their suspicions that something more than a simple fire had occurred. Had she been drugged? Or did she recognize an intruder? The Sodders quickly realized that official help might not find the truth they so desperately sought. Their faith in the initial investigation, shaken by dismissed concerns, and what they felt were premature conclusions. They began their own investigation. A painful, lifelong quest fueled by parental love and an unyielding need for answers. Posting flyers, questioning neighbors, following every tip, no matter how small or strange. They offered a reward, hoping to incentivize anyone with information to come forward. But the answers kept slipping through their fingers like smoke. Each dead end brought fresh waves of grief and frustration, yet their resolve did not waver. One of the first clues came from a local woman who said she saw a car speeding away from the solder house the night of the fire. A large vehicle, she said, with dark windows and children inside. This vision of children being driven away was both horrifying and a spark of hope that they might be alive. Another witness said she spotted the children at a rest stop the next day, accompanied by two adults who refused to let the children speak. This woman, a waitress, recalled the children appearing subdued and the adults acting suspiciously. She only made the connection after seeing photos of the missing solder children. But these reports were dismissed by police as mistaken memories or fantasies fueled by grief. This dismissal was a bitter pill for the Sodders, reinforcing their belief that they were alone in their search for what they believed to be a crime. Then came the letters, hundreds of letters over the years. A deluge of mail from across the country, each one needing to be evaluated. Some were from strangers claiming to have seen the children alive. Many of these were vague or ultimately unverifiable. Others were cruel hoaxes, designed to inflict more pain on the already suffering family. But a few letters contained details that only someone close to the case could have known. These were the communications that truly haunted the Sodders, hinting that somewhere someone held the key to the mystery. The community was divided. The inexplicable nature of the case bred widespread speculation. Some supported the Sodders, helping with their search and offering condolences. This support was a lifeline for the grieving family. Others whispered that perhaps the fire was no accident, that the Sodders knew more than they said. George's Italian heritage and his vocal anti-Mussolini stance became subjects of some darker rumors in the small town. Rumors swirled that the family was hiding a secret. These suspicions added an extra layer of burden to the family's immense grief. George and Jenny fought to keep hope alive. Even as the years stretched into decades, their determination was unwavering. They paid for private detectives, traveled across states, and chased every possible lead. Their financial resources dwindled under the strain of the continuous search. They faced financial ruin. The business suffered as George dedicated himself to finding his children. But they refused to give up. To stop searching was to accept a fate they could not believe without proof. They rebuilt their home on the same spot, but created a memorial garden for their lost children, a testament to their enduring hope and sorrow. Then, more than 20 years after the fire, a strange photograph arrived in the mail. It was 1968, and this unexpected arrival sent a shockwave through the Sodder family. A portrait of a man resembling Louis Sodder, one of the missing children. He would have been in his late 20s, and the resemblance to their 9-year-old Louis, now matured, was striking. The back had a cryptic message: Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, E lil boys, A901132 or 35. The name Frankie was unfamiliar, and the rest of the message was baffling. George was both terrified and hopeful. Jenny, too, clung to the possibility that this was their son. Was this proof the children survived? Or a cruel trick? The photo's quality made absolute identification difficult, but the hope it ignited was powerful. George hired a private investigator to follow the lead. He sent the investigator to Kentucky, the state of the photo's postmark, to try and unravel the mystery. But after some weeks, the man vanished, never to be heard from again. He never submitted a final report or invoice. Was he silenced? Did he uncover something too dangerous? Or had he simply absconded with the Sodders' money? The family feared the worst, that he had gotten too close to a dangerous truth. No bodies, no proof of death, no answers. despite the decades of searching. Just the burning question: what really happened to the Sodder children? The case remains unsolved, a chilling reminder that some disappearances don't just end in tragedy. They begin a lifetime of mystery. But the story doesn't end here. The clues grow stranger, the rumors darker, and the hope never dies. Join us as the theories delve into even more unsettling territory. As the years passed, the mystery of the Sodder children deepened, stretching beyond the charred remains of a family home and into the tangled web of rumors, theories, and unanswered questions. The official explanation of an accidental fire seemed increasingly flimsy against the weight of unexplained events and sinister possibilities. One of the most persistent theories centers on the involvement of organized crime. This wasn't mere speculation. It was rooted in George Sodder's own background and experiences. Post-World War II America was rife with underground operations, and the coal mining business wasn't immune. George, an Italian immigrant, born Giorgio Sodu, was known for his success but also for his outspoken criticism of Mussolini, which had allegedly earned him enemies. George Sodder, an Italian immigrant, had enemies, rivals who allegedly threatened him and his family. Reports circulated of confrontations and veiled warnings related to his anti-fascist views or attempts at extortion. One story involved an insurance salesman who, after being rebuffed, supposedly warned George that his house would go up in smoke and his children destroyed because of his remarks about Mussolini. Another involved a man who, after being denied work, pointed to the home's fuse boxes and said they would cause a fire. The night of the fire, some say, wasn't a random accident, but a targeted act of violence. Perhaps a retaliation or a brutal message. Could the children have been kidnapped as a warning or a punishment for refusing to cooperate with local mobsters? This theory suggested a terrifying reality where the children were alive but stolen, their absence a constant torment. The coordinated nature of the latter's disappearance, the disabled trucks, and the cut phone line lent credence to the idea of a planned operation. Years after the fire, Jenny Sodder began receiving strange phone calls. These calls added a layer of psychological warfare to her unending grief. Heavy breathing, cryptic warnings, sometimes just an unsettling silence on the line. "Stop looking for your children," one voice hissed, "or you'll lose more than your home." The threats were clear, designed to intimidate and halt their search. These calls were chilling, proof that someone somewhere knew more than they were saying. They implied a conspiracy of silence and a desire to keep the truth buried. Yet the police never traced the calls, and no arrests were made. This lack of progress only deepened the family's distrust and isolation. From time to time, supposed sightings of the Sodder children would surface. These tantalizing reports would momentarily reignite hope, only to often lead to disappointment. One man claimed he saw Jenny Sodder walking through a bus station in Florida, years after the fire. This referred to the younger Jenny Sodder, one of the missing daughters. Another woman said she saw Betty Sodder working as a waitress in a remote town. Each such claim was painstakingly investigated by the family, often at great emotional and financial cost. Were these children living under new identities forced into silence? Or were these simply cases of mistaken identity, cruel coincidences that played on the family's desperate hope? The family received letters, postcards, and photographs, some from strangers, some that felt painfully personal. The 1968 photograph of the man resembling Louis was the most prominent, but it was part of a larger pattern of strange communications. One letter read, "Your children live. Find us at the crossroads." Such messages were maddeningly vague, offering glimmers of hope without concrete direction. Another contained a faded photograph of a boy resembling one of the Sodder children. But the authenticity of these clues was impossible to verify. Were they genuine leads or cruel hoaxes designed to torment the grieving family? George and Jenny spent the rest of their lives chasing shadows. Their dedication to finding their children was absolute. They placed billboards along highways, desperately appealing for information. These billboards, with photos of the 5 children and offers of a reward, became famous local landmarks, silent testaments to an enduring mystery. They even hired private investigators, some of whom disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The investigator hired to look into the Louis Sauter photograph vanished, adding another layer of intrigue and fear. The search took a toll, financially, emotionally, and physically. Yet they never gave up. Jenny wore black for the rest of her life in mourning and maintained a memorial garden for her children. Beauty, the dog who stayed silent on that terrible night, became a symbol of the mystery. Her uncharacteristic quietude remained one of the most perplexing aspects of the case. Some said her silence was fear. Others whispered she had seen something too terrifying to bark about. Or perhaps had she been drugged by an intruder she didn't perceive as a threat? The truth remains unknown. Despite years of investigation, the case was eventually closed by authorities. The official stance remained unchanged. The fire was ruled accidental, the children presumed dead. But to the Sauters, and to many who heard their story, the case was far from closed. No bodies, no answers, just questions that echo through time. What really happened to the Sauter children? Were they victims of a cruel crime, spirited away by dangerous men? Or did fate deal them a different hand, one that history forgot to record? The truth remains out there, waiting. As the sun sets on the Sauter family's tragedy, one thing remains certain. Some mysteries refuse to die quietly in the dark. The years passed, decades turned to generations, but the mystery of the Sauter children refused to fade. It became a fixture in the tapestry of American unsolved mysteries, a story of enduring grief and unanswered questions. George and Jenny Sauter grew old, their hearts heavy but hopeful, their spirits unbroken. The search for their 5 children defined their lives after that Christmas Eve. They never stopped searching. They never stopped believing. Jenny wore black in mourning until her death and lovingly tended a memorial garden at their home site. In the 1960s, Jenny made a desperate public plea on television. Her health was declining, but her resolve remained. "If you see my children, please, send word. They are my heart, my soul. I will not rest until they are home." Her words echoed across the nation, a mother's love made public, a hope made fragile but fierce. This appeal brought renewed attention, but no definitive answers. The Sauters placed billboards along highways, pleading for information. These became iconic, especially the one on Route 16. One billboard displayed a childhood photo of the 5 missing children with the simple question, "Have you seen these children?" A substantial reward was offered. Passers-by would often stop, stare, and wonder. The billboards kept the children's faces and their mystery alive in the public consciousness. Even decades later, letters continued to arrive. Long after George D. 1969 and Jenny D. 1989 passed without knowing the truth. Some contained haunting messages. "We are here, we are safe. Look for us where the stars meet the earth." But these clues only deepened the enigma, offering no real path to resolution. Why was the ladder missing? Who cut the phone line? Why did the trucks fail? These fundamental questions still lack satisfactory answers. Was it truly an accident, or something darker? Did the children escape? Were they taken? Or worse? And what role did the silent dog Beauty play in that night's story? Each question a testament to the case's enduring ambiguity. In recent years, amateur sleuths and online communities have reignited interest in the Sauter case. The internet has provided new platforms for discussion and investigation. Using old photos, archived news reports, and DNA technology, they hope to finally uncover the truth. Some have explored the possibility of using ground-penetrating radar at the fire site, or attempting to trace descendants from the mysterious Louis Sauter photograph. But as of now, the mystery remains unsolved. Despite renewed efforts, definitive answers are still out of reach. The Sodders story is not just about vanished children. It is about the lasting impact on a family and a community. It speaks to the unending pain of unresolved loss, the grief, the hope, the fear that the truth may never be known. The surviving Sodder children and their descendants continue to live with the legacy of this tragedy. Imagine losing your children to a fire, only to have no proof of their fate. What would you do if every lead turned cold, every clue a dead end? How far would you go to uncover the truth? The Sodders' relentless decades-long search is a profound testament to parental love. The Sodder children vanished into the night of Christmas 1945, but their story continues to haunt us. A tragedy wrapped in mystery, a family's heartbreak etched into history. And the question remains, are they out there, waiting to be found? Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you want to explore more unsolved mysteries, subscribe and ring the bell.